Welcome back to the Creator Spotlight podcast. My guest today is Kate Lindsay, who is known for writing about internet culture in her newsletter Embedded and all sorts of publications like the New York Times, The Atlantic, and GQ. Some recent topics she's written about are online username markets, moms face-tuning their children unwillingly, and remote work productivity monitoring. Besides writing about the internet, she also sometimes makes ceramics about it. She's currently selling handmade mugs painted in the patterns of New York Times games Wordle and Connection grids. That's an abbreviated intro of who you are. Do you have anything to add?
No, other than I hope by Christmas I'm going to also do just traditional crossword mugs as well.
Oh, okay. That's a lot more work, though.
I know. That's down the line.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we'll start with Embedded, get into plenty of other things. It's a regular newsletter. I think it's usually 3 days a week, sometimes 4, sometimes 2.
Yeah.
You've got Sundays are like link roundups, classic newsletter form. Mondays and Wednesdays might be some of your essays, and then Fridays are often this like written interview series called My Internet. Am I missing anything? How else?
No.
What would you describe?
No, I would say the aim is always 3 times a week: an essay on Monday, an interview on Wednesday, and a My Internet survey on Friday. And the My Internet survey is a little bit, because an interview is normally about something specific that a person or creator is doing, whereas My Internet is we just find cool people and ask them, how they fill out a survey about how they spend their time online, which is always fun.
Okay, cool. So No Filter was the editorial arm of influencer.co, which I understand is like a two-way influencer marketplace, slash kind of social media network. In May 2020, they hired Nick Catucci to make an editorial outlet for them, which was No Filter. He hires you 2 months later to be kind of the sole writer. You write presumably hundreds of articles for the website, and then 1 year later, out of nowhere, it shuts down. Embedded becomes a out of the ashes rises as a Substack, whatever. And then Nick remains editor, and you remain writer. So that's like, I don't know. Do you want to add any color to that?
No, I'm so shocked at how thorough the research is down to the month. Yeah, I mean, I had been at Refinery 29 for like combining full-time and freelance 4 years before that. And while I was there, I always grew up watching YouTubers specifically. And so my scope was really small in the beginning, which was just like, I think I was on the entertainment team, and I remember just being like, we should be writing about these YouTubers. But this was pre-pandemic. And so it was just an uphill battle to get it published. But it was kind of crazy. Like the moment the pandemic hit and nothing was filming, like some things were still coming out, but it was like suddenly my skill set was valuable because everyone was making content online or turning to content creators. And so it kind of was a coincidence, but like that also coincided with me going to No Filter because I've been at Refinery for a long time. I basically felt like I didn't know what was next there. And I knew that if it was one of those things where I could easily just stay there until I got laid off, which it would have happened.
That's what it does.
Yeah, but I was like, you know what, I'm never going to leave if I don't leave now for this, because it was like a bit of a risk. It was totally brand new. But I figured if I could just, 1, get out, make some progress, and 2, just see what it's like working somewhere where it's just internet culture coverage and we can shape it and grow it. I learned just a lot about starting something and wrangling interviews when you don't really have anything to point to. So it was definitely really good. And we grew quite a bit. But yeah, just it was just one of those things, like the economic times were really bad. And, when you're looking to cut something, it is often editorial that goes first. And so, but luckily we were able to just take it and transition it into, we were able to use the old email list because we didn't send out highlights as a newsletter. We basically were able to use that list we couldn't take the emails, but we could email them and go, hey, we're moving to this. Yeah.
How big was it, the email list?
The email list was pretty big. It was like, I think 30,000. We got maybe 500 people who opted in, which isn't bad. It's not starting from scratch.
In terms of like a click rate, I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So we got 500 people ish. And then, some people just from the announcement, but really it's just sort of grown, I would say, by like but it grows steadily at about 10K per year free subscribers. And so I was looking at all this stuff because I'm actually very hands off with the numbers for my own like
I read that, yeah.
emotions. But I was looking just so I could come prepared. And so yeah, we're close to hitting 35 K right now,
Nice.
which is crazy and like still not, it's still something that for the most part I just send off into a void, and I'll get like some feedback, but really like it's been very weird, especially as it was something that started in the pandemic, and now we're all sort of out and about again to like
Mhm.
run in and see living, breathing people who are like, "Oh, I read your newsletter," and it's so that's still weird to square,
Yeah.
but yeah,
No,
I love it. Yeah.
when you made the transition and
Hmm.
started Embedded, I'm curious how, like, the editorial mission or voice changed, or if it did at all, like, and I'm sure
Yeah.
now it has, so I guess, like,
Hmm.
how was it different, if at all, maybe those first few months to year, and then
Yeah.
from that, how has it changed to now?
Well, yeah. So when it started, it was more like the original website, which was creator interviews. And we also were doing it because we had a very generous severance
Nice.
that we were able to like for 3 months, we were like, okay, let's just pretend this is our job
It's
now.
like
And
seed funding.
yeah, that the
Mhm.
severance is paying us and it was unmonetized. I think I was writing 5 days a week, like just something really short every day. And so that was good in the sense, and this is what I'll always say when people ask is like, now it's just like, I think it could be very easy if you are in charge of your own publishing. If you don't have an idea, it's really tempting to be like, well, I just won't write something. And what I think was good about, especially because Nick took it very seriously, and like the
Mhm.
theme of all this is going to be that Nick looks at the numbers. Nick is the one
Well,
being
because
understood.
he has, like, I don't know, like, 20 years of experience in it or
Yes,
something,
yeah.
right?
So if I
Mhm.
didn't, I think if I worry that if I hadn't had him to be accountable to, I don't really know if it would have
Which is
done
awesome.
as well. Yeah, no, it's really great. And so like, yeah, so and I think it's helpful to get yourself in a routine of like needing to come up with an idea, and not saying that they're bad ideas, but it just makes you, if you're just waiting for inspiration to strike, maybe that's what like the idyllic writer life is like, but it's not
Yeah.
one for a writer that needs to sort of
Not for the
make
21st
money.
century.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's good. And also you push yourself, and I'm also someone who very much will just start with a big idea and then find what it is I really think or I'm trying to say as I'm writing, and then I go back and like re-angle it.
Mhm. That's, like, the point of writing, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, so the first year was very much that, but I think what we kind of also we wanted to lean into what was exciting about having a newsletter, which was we weren't writing a website where we were trying to convince strangers to click. We were
Mhm.
ostensibly sending out writing to people who had already expressed a desire to read it. And so it meant that we were free from, you know, um, writing an explainer on drama. And I really, that kind of allowed me to move a bit away. I mean, so much of my early internet career was explainers, and I do think those have a place. But I think one of the things I started to realize, and I've said this before, but is just when I was doing dedicated internet culture coverage at No Filter, I would talk to the people in my life about what I wrote about that day. And they would be like, I've never heard of that person or that
Yeah.
thing. And I would kind of start to be like, and I think it's easy to be like, well, there's like regular people and the extremely online, but the regular people still have phones and they like,
Yeah.
have Instagram and they have all this stuff. And so I was like,
You were getting, like,
why?
too inside baseball on, like, the
Right.
moment
It
of the
was just
day.
like, well, how is this internet culture coverage if it at a certain point it feels like I'm just writing for other internet culture journalists and not
Yeah.
like because everyone uses social media and the internet. I mean, not everyone, but I just was like, okay, I just right now the internet culture writing is not indicative of the larger experience of
Mhm.
being on the internet. And I felt I was doing the importance of the internet a bit of a disservice by only writing about it through the lens of like, this teen is mad at this teen.
Yeah.
And like us,
Well,
we're
so
just
you
like,
go from that, from, like, this teen is mad at this teen to, like, what's the like, how do teens experience being online,
yeah,
and, like, what are the implications of that?
yeah,
You move from,
yeah.
like, like, micro to macro kind of
Yeah,
view.
what I've said is that rather than like my beginning career was writing about what was happening like on the phone, and now I try to write about what's happening to the person who's holding the phone.
That's good.
And I find that can just it I just found when I think about it through that way, like frankly, the piece just does better. And so then it's like a not totally altruistic. I'm like, oh, like this, I want to like the best feeling is just writing something people feel seen in, and
Mhm.
unless they're a certain subset of internet user, they're they're not seen in the really specific micro trends that are happening. They're they're seen in the broader stuff, like why do dating apps suck now? Things like
Yeah.
that.
That's more relevant. Yeah. I did want to ask about like how
Mm-hmm.
you make money. So I know you
Mm-hmm.
have this.
Yeah.
You're a freelance writer. You're like constantly
Mm-hmm.
publishing articles. And
Mm-hmm.
then also like I only saw this in your Instagram bio. You work for this company
Yeah.
DM.
Yeah.
I didn't see it on your LinkedIn, but it was in
Oh
your
my
Instagram bio.
God,
So I
I
was
just
like, is this a
never
full time
update my
job?
LinkedIn.
Oh
No,
well,
I
yeah.
just never
We could
update.
get into
No,
LinkedIn
so
later. But yeah. So what do you do for work?
yeah, so I'd say like my main sources of income, and I'm like very open to being transparent about this stuff because I like don't think there's any reason to. It just
Hmm.
like only helps people. So I would
Agree.
say my main income is embedded. I would say
Mhm.
I have it so it pays me on the 15th of each month. It really actually fluctuates more than you would think, depending on who because there's churn, but then there's like sometimes you get an influx, and so I can get anywhere from I would say like the base lowest that I get now would be $1,500 dollars a month. But
Yeah.
then the most I ever got, I remember this was insane, was 3,000.
Oh
And
wow.
I don't super know what happened. It's just like who, and so I'll usually get something between that a month, which is my rent,
Yeah.
essentially. And so then on the outside of that, yeah, I do have a contract with GQ where I write like a handful of stories a month. There's embedded, there's GQ, and then there's DM, which are all contract roles, where I like log my hours. And so it's kind of like
Mhm.
those are just what I will get no matter what, because I'm doing those things. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, so DM, I'm a newsletter editor
Yeah.
there. And so what I am in charge, it's a part-time role. And I basically just they have 2 newsletters a week. I either write them or I help curate them or help edit people who write for them and just get it out and just kind of keep it flowing. And also like I'm in meetings and come up with like ideas for the app. The app is should have started with that. I should have explained. Is
It's like a
it's
search engine for
yeah, it's like it's called they call it like Reddit for Reddit for hot girls.
yeah.
It's like a sort of crowdsource social search
It's
engine where you
Fishwife
can
Google.
yeah. You can come and like Google your or DM your problems like either like if you want to know like about is this symptom normal for PMS or something
Mhm.
or just like this really embarrassing thing happened to me. Can you talk me off a ledge or whatever?
Mhm.
Which is good. So yeah, so I do their newsletter. And then yeah, on top of that, I freelance.
Yeah.
And the Atlantic, obviously I
Yeah.
still like
What is so wait,
wrote
with The Atlantic, your title there was newsletter engagement editor. What does that
yeah.
mean?
That's a great question. I can tell you like the inside baseball of it all was that I had 2 competing job offers
Mm.
and the original role at the Atlantic was a more entry level role. Uh but then I got this offer from BuzzFeed which was more and so they wanted to match it, but in order to match it it had to be because of union stuff it needed to be a different title. And so that's why there's kind of this
So were
headline
you
or
writing a newsletter there then, or were you
sometimes I would write it.
okay?
My role it was really the whole team was pretty nebulous because it was like this new initiative they started, and so we kind of all just did each other. Like it was
Mhm.
just like we all did. Like I was socialing stuff. I was literally just doing the production. I was writing or like going through and like editing stuff. Doing like
Mhm.
strategy stuff, ideas, like really, really anything. And then also because I was in there, I was like, well, I really want to try and write. And it took a lot of failed pitches. And
Mhm.
actually, so the first thing I wrote for them was Millennial Pause,
Mhm.
which is so
Big
weird. So I
one.
was scrolling the other day and Ariana Grande was on Penn Badgley's podcast and he started recording and then he was like, oh, I feel like I just millennial paused. And then she went, oh, you didn't millennial pause. And I'm like,
That's
it's just
crazy.
like in the lexicon
Mhm.
now. And that's so wild because I didn't coin the exact phrase
Yeah. You
of
were writing as
create
like a TikToker, then you wrote
yeah,
about
TikToker did it,
that.
and I noticed it like months before the Atlantic piece, and I wrote a little piece for Embedded that was just the millennial pause, and
Which
it
oh
was
wait,
about
also for for anyone listening who doesn't know what it is, it's like when you start
oh
recording and
yes,
you like situate before you start
yeah,
talking, right?
you're checking to make sure it's recording
Mhm.
before you start, and the real sin is not doing that. I would say like people of all ages do that, but Gen Z knows to edit it out, and I think
Mhm.
millennials leave it in, and they do. There are some egregious pauses I've
Yeah.
noticed, but basically Taylor Swift had done it, and then this TikToker stitched it and was like, "Wow, even Taylor isn't immune to the millennial pause before you speak or whatever."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, that's so funny!" Like the millennial pause. And yes, I wrote it for Embedded, and then the executive editor, Adrian of The Atlantic, saw it and was like, you should do a piece on millennialisms for The Atlantic. And so the Millennial Pause was like the headline of it, and it was like the way in, but it was more broadly about the way that millennials have these sort of hallmarks of an earlier internet.
Yeah.
And I I mean, that piece like changed my life. It's like
Yeah.
kind of crazy because it just, I remember being like, I hope someone reads this because I hope my first Atlantic piece, doesn't flop. And like, I've never had anything like it. I've had some things now close. But just in terms of like that, I know I'm gonna remember certain things over others. I didn't anticipate how upset it was gonna make some people, and so I dealt with a lot of that. I dealt with a lot of like pretty nasty comments, and to this day, I like cannot figure out why. I guess people felt it was like ageist, and I don't know, but it was.
I mean,
I'm a millennial.
Yeah, me too. It's like 29 to like 44 now. I don't even know.
Yeah. It was so weird. It's just like, no, like I think it's interesting. I think these anthropological things are super interesting about like how being on our phones. I also think it's something like, what a great thing to hold on to, that little bit of humanity of like, I am separate from my phone. I am checking. And I didn't coin this. They being the nebulous audience on TikTok coined it afterwards. It's called the Gen Z shake, which is like, they are so embedded with their phones that like, they are recording when they're in the middle of talking. Like it's just coming in and like they're putting it down that you're getting like they couldn't wait.
Media
they're not
res,
like
you
getting
could call it.
exactly. And so I think that's just so interesting the way that even a little simple action, if you're pausing or if you're just starting, like marks how you grew up online. So yeah, that piece. I'm kind of forgetting what question I'm answering.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Maybe okay, we'll move on to another one. I didn't want to stop you. It was good stuff. So I'm curious though, like, given that you do both, you're a newsletter editor and a newsletter writer, what's like the relationship between those things? I don't know. Like, what can you say about either role, being on both sides of either role?
Yeah, editing I'm not like an experienced editor. I did some editing at No Filter. That was technically my role, was news editor, and so but I've definitely found I do have more comfort as a writer. And so the thing I try to do, especially with DM, a lot of the time we're getting like it's volunteer based. And now, because they're still in the early stages of getting funding for that type of
thing. It's like
thing.
volunteers of like people who like are power users of the app or something.
Yeah. People who are on the app or like friends of mine or friends of Emma, the founders. And so I'm very cognizant with that. So I would say that changes the editing a little bit because I'm cognizant that this person is not getting paid. And so
you can't
I am like, so I basically just try to go through and clean it up for them and just be like, okay, here's either grammar stuff. And then like, here's so we can focus it a little bit, or maybe like, I understand what you're saying here. Maybe can you simplify it? Or like, this is really good. Is there any way you could talk about this a little earlier, but like very light touch where it's just like, I'm not going to send it back and be like, take another stab at this. And no, they don't need that. Like the people who volunteer to do it are doing it because they're very passionate. And yeah, so I try to be, because I think the edits I don't like, and Nick doesn't do this, but I've had editors in the past where it feels like it's just being edited to how they would have written it. And I really
that was
try
me
not
in
to,
high school at my school newspaper.
I
was the
like,
opinion
here's what
editor.
I would say.
Yeah.
And so so I just like I really try not to do that. And I try to just be really like, both for being the payment reason and for just how I like kind of operate it. Like I think positivity is a better motivator than being like, this is, so I try to be like, here's what's really great about this piece. Can we like push it more towards that? But I also feel very unqualified to give editing advice because I'm so much more of a writer. And so I just try to take from like what I've learned from being edited by Nick, like, okay, what normally gets taken out, cross it out.
Yeah. Okay. A different question. This is kind of annoying one, I guess. What is a newsletter? What defines a newsletter? Like,
great.
I want to hear yours, and then I have one.
I think what it's, because like, especially on Substack and most of these other platforms, it exists as a web page as well. And so it is, sometimes I'm wondering what I'm prioritizing. Like the thing is, when it goes into an inbox, I can't see it. So, but I would just say what's different to me is kind of what I said earlier, and how I approach it is that like, I am exclusively writing for people who have expressed an interest in hearing from me. And so that just gives a kind of freedom, but it also makes me want to treat them, not that I would be disrespectful, but I'm like very cognizant of like, this is a kind thing that
Yeah,
people are
you
doing.
can have that more informal relationship,
Yeah.
have those
And so,
colloquialisms.
yeah. And so,
Mhm,
and I'm also like, so like, I don't ever want to phone it in
mhm.
or anything like that
Especially when
because
they're paying
right,
you to
right.
write
Like I
this
just
for
feel
them,
so much
like
more of a real relationship there where I just am like, no, like like I think that I say that only because a lot of my early career, like we mentioned, was during a time when like SEO, but also like Facebook was really big
mhm.
for news. And it was
Were
honestly,
we ever so young?
I know. And it's not like you were writing with blatant disregard
Uh,
for the reader, but you were writing something that would have a headline that you knew what you were doing with it. And or you knew it was going to make people
yeah,
mad and that's why you did it. And like that's not super. So sometimes I will be aware of, oh, this will probably make, well, for embedded I really don't do that. Basically embedded is like free from me trying to stoke a specific negative emotion from you to get you to read it, and I don't
yeah,
think I will ever do that. And some of my freelance pieces, I'm like, I will be writing something and be like, they're gonna hate this.
yeah.
But it's different, whereas like embedded, I'm not trying to make people angry. Like I just want people to feel relatable, or to like read the thing that they've been thinking but hadn't been written
Yeah. That's a really good definition. I think it's I was, like, trying to come up with a really umbrella one.
yet.
I think I wrote this last night. Um, I wrote it as an email written one to many, sent on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's, like
that's the
it's, like,
bare
the most, like,
bones.
clinical, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I like you I think the relationship there
Hmm.
is, like, more accurate. I don't know. I guess mine is trying to capture, like I don't know. I talk to people who are it's more like business driven than creative driven, which is like
Hmm.
this is like I'm constantly, tweaking my theory of creator, which is like currently it's like a Venn diagram, right? Where like
Yeah.
if you're trying to create content online and like with some goal of like audience building and monetizing, whatever, it's like you either are like creative driven and that's your skill, or you're like business marketing driven and that's your skill. And like
Yeah.
at a certain point, if you want it to like be anything, do anything, you have to like meet in the middle somewhere, either
Yeah.
by, learning those skills or like working with somebody from the other side. And I've seen people who like are like clearly more the business marketing type of
Hmm.
person, but like are trying to be a creator and it's like it's just not good. And maybe they've built an
Yeah.
audience and it's not good. Um, and it's like, oh, they should just like find somebody who's like a good writer and like they should work together or something. Which okay, it kind of moves into another question, another definition. How do you
Yeah.
define the word creator? What is that term? Because you've also written about this a lot.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to, I think this is really nebulous, and this is something that I do think. So I'm working on a piece right now,
Mm,
about basically AI rights after death for regular people.
yeah,
Of like, there are these services that you can turn your loved one into like a chatbot and keep
yeah.
talking with them after, and it's like, well, what if you don't want that? Like, kind of like a digital do not
This is like
resuscitate
the
type
next
thing.
stage of like the Tupac like
Yeah.
hologram
Hmm.
conversation.
And so, but interesting. It's like, it's for the loved ones who've been left behind. Like, I don't know. I also think a lot about
Mm,
the ways that technology is used to avoid uncomfortable feelings. Like that's what dating apps have done to
yeah,
dating, where it's like,
de-risk
and
social
then
life.
yeah, and now it's like, okay, if you are normalizing this, then we're like, what is that doing to grieving? Like, I just don't think
Mm,
it's going to be healthy. But basically, to be like, I don't want this to happen, and you're a regular person. There are no laws
mm,
to enforce that unless you are a personality or performer, and the definition of that is like someone who either makes their living from like singing, dancing, entertaining,
This is like
or
a
like,
legal definition.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I forget the exact thing, but basically it's a definition that I think is outdated,
Hmm.
because like, what does like you and I think it's safe to say, are like not traditional celebrities, but
Yeah.
like we are, I would say, personalities in
We're
our
creating
own
this thing,
communities.
these
Yeah.
things for
Do we
distribution online.
qualify to be like, hey, for that reason, can you not? And like, I don't and like what counts as like enough followers or whatever. So basically the idea of what makes a creator, I don't know, because I'm also feel like right now the kind of big creators are not really that zeitgeisty anymore,
Yeah.
and people are way more interested in their, like, they like feeling like a creator is theirs. They like a kind of smaller creator who maybe they see themselves in their job or their body type or just their lifestyle,
Yeah.
and it's a much more personal, smaller relationship, and like that's still a creator.
Listen, so
And
wait,
so
let me share my definition quick. I
yeah.
think I this is constantly changing, but right now I
Mhm.
think it's like at the most core, highest level, this is too umbrella. It's like
Mhm.
somebody who is a creator rather than a lurker, somebody who's contributing to the
Mhm.
conversation
Mhm.
online in some way, a participant in the internet. But I
Yeah.
think more accurately, still maybe a little too umbrella, but more accurately, it's like somebody who is creating actively, but like with the intent of reaching people beyond their family and friends, right? So you're
Yes.
not just like
Yeah.
private Instagram photos for, here's what I'm up to, I'm at the beach.
Mhm.
It's like I'm trying to reach an audience or I'm trying to monetize, but then that monetization, I think, is so broad from like ad revenue brand deals
Yeah.
to like I'm just trying to raise my profile so I can get a better job, and that's
Yeah.
also monetization. So
Mhm.
I think, I mean, to your conversation about like where
Mhm.
does the border lie? I feel like it's like anybody who is making connection, anybody who other people have a parasocial relationship with,
Yeah.
no matter how
Mhm.
few, even if you just have
Yeah.
one of those, right? Which goes back to what I
Mhm.
was saying with the newsletter, where it's like you're sending it one to many. And so
Yeah.
like if you're a creator, it means you're creating content one to many
Yeah.
that's meant to reach people beyond people in real life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I agree. I think if you're opening up Instagram and posting with an awareness of an audience, then that is posting as a creator. And I think about it because I remember like growing up, I was always like, I want to be a writer. When can I call myself a writer? And the thinking
Same.
was always like, if you write, you're a writer. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, if you make a reel, are you a creator?
Mhm.
Maybe. Like I said that, but that like it's hard because also that's just like so not the same level of respected.
Mhm. Well, I
And
think then it's like this goes back to like the money difference. It's like maybe you're a creator, but maybe what a creator is in this way that like we're kind of talking about is like a media business, and a
mhm,
creator is just a type of media business that's like personal brand driven. Like
yeah.
Mr. Beast, obviously, like
Hmm.
huge version of that, but like so is, I don't know, like Nolita Dirtbag in a way,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's pretty vague and I think it's changing, but I think it's kind of like if you're doing the work because it is work,
Mhm.
then yeah, like you can call yourself that, even though like I think I would, I think you can feel bashful about it the way I probably used to feel
Yeah.
bashful about being like, yeah, I'm a writer, but like I do have the backing now of like being able to say I get paid for it, but I don't think yeah, like you said, I don't think you have to monetize in that way. I think if you have an audience who you are creating content for,
Mhm.
then you are
Yeah.
creating.
The benefits are bigger. Real quick, I do want to touch on embedded stats. We talked about it
Yeah.
briefly. You said you're around
Hmm.
35K. I guess the other stats would be open rate, click rate,
Yeah.
and then like percentage of subscribers who are
Yeah.
paying for you.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. So the open rate, the bigger the um free subscribers are, the open rate gets a little like once we tipped
The
over
percentage goes down.
30,000, yeah, the
Mhm.
percentage went down. So it used to be in the like 42% open rate. Now I'd say it's like 36% open rate I was looking
Well, which is
for.
also like email wide is happening
Yeah.
right now. I
Uh-huh.
understand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say the views range between 20K. Yeah, they're in the 20Ks, 25. And then we will occasionally have something that like takes off and just gets like a ton.
Mhm.
Like
The productivity monitoring one, I believe, right?
yeah, that one did well. Right now I'm just yeah, it falls anywhere between 20 to 30K views. And
It's
like
pretty
it
good.
is always falling around a 35 open rate. And I mean there are always some flops.
Mhm. So, what about like click rate? Maybe like on one of the Sunday link roundup issues, because
Let's see.
your other
Yeah.
essays aren't necessarily about clicking. But yeah, the link
Yeah.
roundups.
So my most recent Sunday Scroll had a 61% open rate. Um, but yeah, so this is it has I'm always like, how is this working out? Because it has like 316 opens, but then 683 total views. I don't know what that means. But basically the link click rate is 18%.
Oh, that's pretty
Um
good. Yeah.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's not like the numbers aren't huge, but I also like it. It's a smaller pool of people, and I don't do a ton of links
Yeah.
because I thought I would have a lot more, and it turns out I like actually am not.
Well, you're less online these days, right?
I know. I literally was like, God damn it! Like I need to be like. So, I just will go through my history. I'll go through my group chat. I'll try to like I want to make it super organic. Like, what are
Mhm.
me, my friends talking about? What's getting shared?
Today in
What
tab
did I
style.
actually read? Yeah,
Mhm.
and so yeah, it'll vary. And then I'll always do like some self promotion. Notably, I did just notice in that link roundup, absolutely none of the links were anything I wrote, but it was like good because
Alas.
they're linking on the stuff I recommend. Like it
Yeah.
was stories from GQ, and I didn't write that, but it was like
Mhm.
one that I was jealous I hadn't written. And
Okay, wait.
yeah, so yeah.
One more question about stats quick.
Mhm.
How is the audience growing? You said it's been like 10,000 free subscribers a year,
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
Is that like, do people come like through, you know, when you write for GQ or whatever, they look up your name? Is it like the My Internet? Because I know the My Internet is always free.
Yeah.
Is it like people?
It's honestly, there will be, and I would say earlier on there were more spikes. Like someone I have to shout out is Rachel Carton, who does Link in
The
Bio,
goat?
did really early on, just put randomly in one of her newsletters, like I really like this newsletter embedded. And that's
Mm,
probably like sort of percentage wise compared to what we already had, like our biggest spike. And then from then on, it would be just like someone genuinely recommending it.
mhm,
Now I do think it just like just every piece either it gets shared or like yeah, it's a creator who I'm interviewing shares it or the My Internet person. It
mhm,
just I would say mostly it comes from collecting people along the way. But when I do write something, when I write something in the Atlantic, it's in my bio, and I'll notice that it'll get a few people. But it's funny because people are not. I remember one time the Washington Post wanted to quote me about something, and like they linked to embedded, and I remember being like, "Oh, like it's in the piece, it's the link," and I would say like maybe two subscribers, and so it's just like it. I think it really comes from like I think broad endorsements on like from like legacy, like people kind of glaze over it. I think it's
mhm.
really if someone who they follow, who they like, or a friend forwards it to them, they'll do it because I just know it just is little by little, a handful every time something goes out,
Yeah.
and that's how it grows. And for paid, for a while, I was doing something they would tell you not to do, which was I just paywalled the interviews because I was being like precious about my precious little essays and I wanted as
Yeah.
many people to read them as possible. But that was what people liked. And you either are interested in an interview or you're not. And also, the person who you're interviewing is less inclined to share it if it's paywalled. It was not a good
Yeah.
strategy. So this year, starting at the end of last year, I switched it. I have one free essay a month. The rest are paywalled. And I had to just like get over it. And then unpaywalling the interviews is great because then they share it and people can read it and you get
Yeah.
yeah, it was like I was like for
It's a
2
good
years
strategy.
making a bad business decision. And really our paid subscribers were not growing when that was the case because at the time I was employed full time at places. And so
Mhm.
it was just what mattered to me more was like the bigger number.
Yeah.
But then when now I'm just way more concerned, or not concerned, like
You don't
I'm
make
way
a
more
living sustainable income.
interested in like paid subscribers and
Mhm.
making it sustainable rather than because once you do hit a certain number, it's not possible that over 30,000 people are all exactly really dedicated to embedded. You're getting a lot more like surface people, not
Yeah.
surface people, but like
As opposed to mole
like
people.
mole people. Yeah, you're just
Uh,
getting people who are like, oh, sure, I'll subscribe because I
yeah.
see that
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
popular newsletter. It's what I'm saying is not meant to be a diss on any like recent followers. It's more that like I notice this happens to big creators where like someone like Charlie D'Amelio who has
Mhm.
100K. No, my God, that's so low. She has 100 million
Yeah. Well, how your
followers on.
engagement rate goes down as you grow
Yeah,
your
her
yeah.
engagement rate is really poor because I think some people just start following because they've heard about her and are like, sure, I'll follow. I'm not saying we're Charlie D'Amelio,
Yeah.
but it is, I do think you reach a certain level where it's just
That's
like,
that's the headline for
um,
this newsletter, the Charlie
yeah,
D'Amelio
yeah,
of Substack.
of Substack. No, yeah, it's more that like, basically what I think I've learned is like, it does readers a disservice to like just think about growing numbers. And now I'd rather the people who are kind enough to like pay or the people who are kind enough to be really engaged readers who don't pay, who exist and are great. Like I
Mhm.
want to write for them and I'm glad to have other people there. Um, and but it's just that's almost you just have to pick you have to focus your efforts a little bit. It's hard.
Yeah. I'm reading Taylor Lorenz's book right now,
Hmm.
Extremely Online, and she was talking about how, like, blogger, like back, 25 years, a quarter century ago, blogging started, and then like people were like, oh, nobody was going to want to read that. It's like it's not edited enough, etc.
Mhm.
People start reading blogs. Actually, it turns out people do like, even if it is lower quality and more colloquial,
Yeah.
whatever. 10 years later, they start doing, the bloggers start getting absorbed back into like traditional media
Mhm.
or like new media institutions.
Yeah.
And then 7, 8 years later, then it's newsletters, and I feel like we're having this conversation again. And
Mhm.
then like newsletter writers, like, I mean, not that you were not a newsletter writer first, like you, Ryan
Mhm.
Broderick, Jack Rains of Young Money are all newsletter writers writing for
Mhm.
Sherwood, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, is it just this? So there's two kind of things in here. Is it just like this endless cycle and like panic over like creators are the new journalists, like the journalist creator is the
Yeah.
model? Like I have a feeling that maybe it's just like this like wave of institutional people leave, people get laid off, etc.
Mhm.
um Maybe the more interesting question within this though is about media literacy, and I feel like
Mhm.
people that meet like there's less trust in institutions and like
Yeah.
big news outlets than ever. And people are going more to indie creators and creator journalists,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure whether or not that actually represents like an increase in media literacy and like skepticism and like
Mhm.
analyzing a bit what you're consuming by going to the individual, or is it just like moving that trust in the institution to the individuals? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is
I
media
think it's
what media literacy, what's the state of it?
I think it's the same reason why I would say the influencers are falling out of favor. I do think there is this inherent skepticism of these institutions, which are people with enough power that you then, or that have, it's hard to trust them
Yeah.
because an influencer who gets tons of followers and suddenly gets like leveled up is not coming at you as a relatable person. They're like kind of in a new tier. You don't know if you could trust the recommendation
And
because
what are
now
their
they kind of are just a,
motivations?
yeah, they're kind of just a billboard now.
Mhm.
Same, I think, with inst- there are flaws and biases within institutions. I've
They're
like,
just people at the end of the day.
yeah, or it's like, and and there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you also can't talk about if there's like an issue with why this piece went out weird the way
Mhm.
it did, or like why this um and so there's just an honesty that can't happen because you're protecting
Mm.
like there's a like you're protecting decision. This isn't anything in particular, but
Yeah.
like it just, I just think you have to be, there's an awareness that you don't know I think the black box of what's
Yeah.
happening
Mm.
behind the article, people can fill in with their own skepticism. And
Yeah.
so I think it's like, because there are some times where I'm like, you know, the New York Times like publishes one opinion and they publish the other, and people are like, so what is it? And like that's a
Yeah.
comprehension issue. Like it's not their job.
Well,
Like
and
they
I'm
are public.
constantly like checking like the headline, like what are they change the headlines like 4 times a day. I'm
Yes,
checking the
yes,
app just
yeah,
to monitor that now, not even to read the article, but just to monitor how
yeah.
they're
Well,
reframing.
oh, like actually, this is a good example. It's like in the Cut. The Cut published something, an article from someone where it was like, "Motherhood didn't change me at all," and
Mhm.
then they published something that was like, "Motherhood changed me," and all the comments on that one were like, "What, you just said it didn't change you," and that I think is an effect of like like a parasocial, like how
Yeah.
everyone's. It's like, well, that's because the Cut is not a singular person. It is an outlet that publishes
Yeah.
um, many opinions. Like
That's the
they're
difference between the
yeah,
institution and the
and
creator.
but I think when you're raised to, because that's also another thing I will even have when I write something, like Millennial Pause. I would be like, people are making fun of millennials online, and then all the replies are like, why are you making fun of millennials? And it's like, no, this, I am reporting on something that's happening from the outside. But there's this, I think, from growing up with creators and getting news that way, it's very like they think they're like, it's you doing this, you are the
Yeah.
face.
That's interesting. Um, One more question.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who write newsletters, given that you've been doing this for years, both for
Yeah.
institutions and yourself?
Yeah, I would say like, I mean, like it is like, because like I said, I started in media like 10 years ago, and I feel like I spent the first 5 years of my time in media feeling like I wanted better for myself, or feeling really stuck. I got like, I'm really grateful for what I got in, how I got into media, and I had a lot of like fun, but then it was really hard to grow. And I think I was annoyed because I was like, had so much noise around me from other people that not because I was like, I wasn't annoyed that I wasn't like a staff writer at the New York Times because I thought my work was like warranted that, but I was like annoyed at myself for not having gotten there yet. And not allowing myself like the fact that you need time.
Crucial
And
ingredient.
yeah, and I would say like you just now being able to look back on 10 years, it was like the slow grind of all those things. And I can point to like meeting that person or writing that thing or answering that DM that then led me to this. It's like the ripple effect that happens. And of like everything is connected, and everything I have now is built on that, just because like that is the inciting incident for some relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
But then also specifically newsletter is what I mentioned earlier, like consistency. Like I said, like our followers don't come because of some like big thing. It comes because like for the most part, every 3 days a week or 4 if you are a paid subscriber, you're getting the same thing. And every time you get like maybe it would start with like maybe 3 free subscribers, maybe then you get 10, maybe you have one that blows up. But it's like you have like
one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, and you have to keep doing it. And I think the hardest part is the beginning when you're not gonna get the numbers you want, and just trusting that you have to, one foot in front of the other. Just like you have to keep coming back and doing it, because like it's pretty rare that you're gonna start a newsletter and suddenly become like a superstar. It's like pretty rare that you're gonna start
the opposite.
It's pretty rare that you're gonna start a newsletter and even over time become a superstar. Like that can't be why you're getting into it.
Charli D'Amelio.
Actually, yeah. It's just like it's like I said, like I feel like we're in a pretty good place, but it's nowhere near my full-time income. So it's just like but what it is valuable, it has been in sort of more it has risen the profile or whatever of my work, and and gotten me a lot of opportunities. And also I think makes my work better because I'm forced to write every week. It can never get rusty.
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, I think it's like the simple but best advice. Anyways, where should people find you?
Sorry, I was just taking a sip of seltzer. So Embedded on Substack 3 times a week, or 4 if you feel like paying. And then I am Catherine Fiona, Catherine with a K and a Y, across all other social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Twitter's kind of a wasteland, but
more active on TikTok these days. You are.
I am. Every so often I'll brave it, but it is so scary. It's the
like
meanest place.
Yeah.
But I would say Instagram is the place to go if you want like real updates. But I would say I would say Embedded is the place to go. See, that's why I'm not.
There we go.
This. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been the Creator Spotlight podcast. Kate Lindsay has been our guest. I have been Francis Zier, and I will be Francis Zier next week. And I'll see you then.